The morning cycle began like every other on Cathara, with the resonant tone of the compliance bell echoing through the silver corridors of facility. 7. Nira pressed her palm against the identification scanner, felt the familiar cold bite of the metal against her pale lavender skin, and stepped into her monitoring station. Her workstation overlooked the planetary docking bay through reinforced transparency panels. Ships arrived daily, bringing supplies, materials, and occasionally diplomatic visitors. Today felt different, though. She couldn't explain why without risking a citation for unexplained intuitive responses. Nira settled into her chair, spine straight, expression neutral. Around her, dozens of other monitors sat in identical poses at identical stations. The uniform hum of productivity filled the air, no conversations, or no unnecessary movements. Certainly no facial expressions beyond the approved baseline of calm efficiency. The first ships of the day cycle were standard cargo vessels, Nira documented. Their arrivals with mechanical precision, logging crew counts, manifest summaries, and compliance ratings. Everything proceeded normally until the third vessel, a sleek diplomatic transport bearing human registry markings as the docking clamps engaged with their usual metallic shriek. Nira observed the disembarking passengers through her scope. Most were standard diplomatic types, formal, restrained, appropriately neutral in their demeanor. But one figure caught her attention and held it with inexplicable magnetism. The human was tall, broad-shouldered, with skin the color of warm earth, and hair that caught the artificial lighting in fascinating ways. But it wasn't his physical appearance that captured Nira's focus. It was something far more dangerous as he stepped onto the platform. A group of Catherian children walked past. In their daily education formation, the human's face ... changed. The corners of his mouth curved upward, his eyes crinkled slightly. His entire countenance transformed into something Nira had never witnessed before. Smile. The word existed in their historical databases. An ancient human facial expression indicating pleasure, amusement, or goodwill. But seeing it in person sent an electric shock through Nira's nervous system. The human's face radiated something indefinable, something that made her chest feel strangely tight and her pulse quicken. The children paused in their formation, clearly as startled as Nira by this unprecedented display. For a moment, the smallest child, a girl with the characteristic silver eyes of their species, tilted her head with what could only be described as curiosity. The human's smile widened, and he raised his hand in a gentle gesture that seemed to encompass warmth and welcome. Then the education supervisor appeared, quickly herding the children away with sharp, efficient movements. The moment shattered, but its impact on Nira remained. She found herself unable to look away from the human as he moved through the standard diplomatic processing. Even in conversation with Catherian officials, traces of that extraordinary expression flickered across his features, sometimes subtle, just a slight upturn at the corners of his mouth. Other times more pronounced when he gestured or spoke with particular emphasis. Monitor 847. The cold voice behind her made Nira's blood freeze. She turned slowly to face Supervisor Kelth, whose pale features held the perfect neutrality expected of all citizens. Yes, Supervisor. Your observation period on the diplomatic platform has exceeded standard duration by 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Explanation required. Nira's mind raced. Truth would mean citation, possibly worse. Minor irregularity in the documentation system, Supervisor. I was ensuring accuracy of the visitor manifest. Kelth's eyes narrowed slightly, the maximum expression of suspicion permitted in his position. Submit your reports for review. Return to standard monitoring protocols immediately. Understood, Supervisor. As Kelth moved away, Nira's hands trembled, almost imperceptibly as she turned back to her station. But her eyes inevitably drifted toward the diplomatic quarters where the human had been escorted. Something had awakened in her mind during those few moments of observation, a curiosity that felt both thrilling and terrifying. The smile haunted her thoughts for the remainder of her shift. What did it mean? How did it feel to create such an expression? And why did witnessing it make her feel so strangely alive? That evening, as she walked through the sterile corridors toward her residential unit, Nira caught her reflection in a service panel. She stared at her own face, the regulation-neutral expression she'd worn her entire life. Experimentally, carefully, she tried to replicate what she'd seen. The corners of her mouth moved upward slightly. The sensation was extraordinary. The detention alert echoed through Facility 7 the following morning. Nira arrived at her monitoring station to find unusual activity in the diplomatic quarters, security personnel, medical scanners, and the unmistakable presence of Warden Vex. Himself overseeing operations, through her observation scope, Nira watched as the human from yesterday was escorted toward the containment sector. His hands were bound with neural dampeners, but his face, even under duress, held traces of that fascinating expression. Her chest tightened with an emotion she couldn't name. "Emotional contamination," whispered Jorik from the adjacent station, barely audible. 3 children reported experiencing unusual facial sensations after yesterday's encounter. Nira's blood chilled. Emotional contamination carried severe penalties: memory adjustment at minimum, complete neural restructuring. In extreme cases, she forced her expression to remain neutral while her mind raced. The shift passed with agonizing slowness. When the evening cycle began, Nira made a decision that would have terrified her days earlier. Instead of returning to her residential unit, she navigated the maintenance corridors toward the containment sector. The detention cells were monitored, but she knew the surveillance schedules. During shift changes, there was a brief window, 17 minutes where coverage overlapped, creating blind spots in the corridor approach. She found him in cell 7, sitting on the regulation bench, staring at his hands. When he looked up and saw her through the transparency barrier, his face transformed again, that remarkable upward curve of his mouth, though tinged with sadness. "You're one of the monitors," he said softly. His voice carried warmth that made her pulse quicken. "I am." She glanced nervously at the corridor. "You are in severe violation for smiling at children." He shook his head. "On my world, that's called being human. Your world permits emotional expression." Marcus, she'd read his name in the diplomatic files, studied her face carefully. "Not just permits. Celebrates it. Do you know what a smile means?" Nira shook her head, though part of her desperately wanted to understand. "It means joy, happiness, connection with another being." He stood, approaching the barrier. "It's how we show others that they matter to us. That's dangerous," she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. "Is it? Or is hiding our feelings? What's truly dangerous?" His eyes held hers with gentle intensity. "What's your name, Monitor 847? Your real name?" The question hung between them like a forbidden fruit. "Nira," she breathed. "Nira." The way he said it made her name sound like music. "Would you like to learn what a smile feels like?" Every regulation, every law of her society screamed against it, but something deeper, something that had awakened yesterday, whispered yes. She nodded. "Look at me," Marcus said gently. "Something that makes you feel ... warm inside. A memory that brings you peace." Nira searched her mind. Most memories were gray, neutral, acceptable. But there was one, a moment in childhood, when she'd discovered a small flowering plant growing, wild in a maintenance shaft. The beauty of it, the secret wonder of its existence. "Now," Marcus continued, "let that feeling flow into your face. Let your mouth follow your heart." Slowly, tentatively, Nira felt her facial muscles respond. The corners of her mouth lifted, slightly, creating an expression she'd never worn before. "There," Marcus whispered, his own smile brightening. "That's a smile." The sensation was intoxicating, a warmth that spread from her face throughout her entire body. For a moment, the sterile world around them seemed less cold, less empty. "It feels ... She struggled for words, like coming alive. Marcus placed his hand against the barrier, palm flat against the transparency. After a moment's hesitation, Nira mirrored the gesture. Their hands separated only by the thin wall between them. Heat seemed to pass through the material, and Nira experienced something entirely new, a connection that transcended physical touch. "They're going to restructure your neural patterns," she said quietly. "Probably." Expression grew serious. "But some things are worth the risk." "What things?" "Truth, beauty, love." He paused. "The right to feel joy when we see children playing." Nira's smile faded as reality crashed back. "I should go, Nira." She turned back. "Practice, in private. Where it's safe, remember what it feels like to be human." As she slipped back through the maintenance corridors, Nira's hand touched her face, still feeling the echo of that remarkable expression. Behind her, Marcus watched until she disappeared, knowing he'd just changed both their lives forever. In his observation chamber, Warden Vex reviewed the surveillance footage with growing concern. The monitor's biometric readings during her shift had shown concerning anomalies: elevated heart rate, increased neural activity in forbidden brain regions. Tomorrow, he decided Monitor 847 would require closer scrutiny. The following days transformed Nira's existence in ways she could never have imagined. In the privacy of her residential unit, she practiced the smile Marcus had taught her, studying her reflection in the polished metal surfaces. Each time, the sensation grew stronger, a warmth that seemed to illuminate her from within. But it wasn't just the smile. Their feelings began emerging like flowers blooming after a long winter. When she saw the morning light filtering through the facility's panels, something lifted in her chest. When Jork made a subtle jest about Supervisor Kelth's rigid posture, she felt an unfamiliar urge to laugh. "You seem different," Jork observed during their shared meal period. His voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes held curiosity. "Different? How?" Nira asked, though she already knew. "More ... present. Alert. As if you're seeing things for the first time." Jork was perceptive. It came from years of monitoring. She trusted him more than anyone else in the facility, but trust was a dangerous luxury on Cathera. "Jork," she said quietly, "have you ever wondered what it would be like to feel ... more?" His eating utensil paused halfway to his mouth. "That's a hazardous question, Nira, but have you?" After a long moment, he nodded. "Every day." That evening, Nira returned to the detention sector. The 17-minute window had become her refuge, her secret passage to a world beyond regulation and control. Marcus was waiting, as if he somehow knew she would come. "You've been practicing," he said, noting the subtle changes in her posture. The way her eyes seemed brighter. "It's becoming easier, but also more dangerous." "Why?" "Beginning to feel things I can't control. When I see something beautiful, my chest responds. When someone shows kindness, I want to respond in kind." She paused. "When I see you, I feel ... what?" "Something I don't have words for." Marcus approached the barrier, his expression tender. "On my world, we call that attraction, affection. Sometimes, if we're very fortunate, love." The word hung between them like a forbidden incantation. Love, the most dangerous emotion of all, the one that had been eradicated from Catherian society for generations. "Is that what this is?" Nira whispered. "I don't know, but I'd like to find out." She placed her hand against the barrier again, and he matched the gesture. This time the connection felt deeper, more intense. If the wall weren't between them... "I have to get you out of here," she said suddenly. "Nira, the risk they're going to restructure you tomorrow. I've seen the scheduling rotations. After that, you won't be ... you anymore." Marcus's face grew grave. "What are you proposing?" "I know. The facility systems. The maintenance tunnels. During the shift change tonight, there's a 30-minute window when the detention sector operates on minimal staff." "And then what? Where would I go?" "Where would you go?" Nira realized. She hadn't thought beyond the immediate rescue. Escape was only the beginning. What came after seemed impossible. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know I can't let them erase you." Marcus studied her face, the determination in her eyes, the way her newly awakened emotions played across her features. "You'd sacrifice everything, your entire life here?" "What life?" The words escaped before she could stop them. "Following regulations? Suppressing every natural impulse? Existing without truly living?" She shook her head. That's not life. That's a different kind of death. Nira. His voice was soft, full of something that made her heart race. Come closer. She pressed herself against the barrier, and he did the same. Their faces were only inches apart, separated by the thin transparency. She could see every detail of his eyes, feel his breath fogging the surface between them. We do this, he said quietly. There's no going back. I know. We'll be fugitives, outcasts. I know. We might not survive. I know. Her voice was steady, certain, but we'll be free. Marcus smiled. Not the gentle expression she'd first witnessed, but something deeper, more intense. Then let's learn what freedom feels like. Leaned forward, pressing his lips against the barrier where her mouth would be if the wall weren't there. Nira mirrored the gesture, and though they couldn't truly touch the intention, the emotion behind it, sent electricity through her entire being, their first kiss. Separated by circumstances, but connected by something far stronger. Tomorrow night, she whispered, be ready. As she slipped away through the maintenance corridors, neither of them noticed the subtle adjustment of a surveillance node, or the way Warden Vex's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but definitely wasn't regulation neutrality either. The security alert pierced the night cycle like a blade. Nira jerked awake in a residential unit as emergency lighting bathed everything in harsh red. Through her communication panel, Supervisor Kelth's voice crackled with barely contained fury. All personnel report for immediate inspection. Security breach detected in Sector 7. Nira's blood turned to ice. Sector 7, the detention area. They knew. She dressed quickly, her mind racing through possibilities. Had someone seen her during yesterday's visit, or the surveillance blind? Spots not as complete as she'd believed. She joined the stream of personnel moving toward the assembly hall. She caught Jorik's eye. His subtle nod told her he understood whatever happened next. They were in this together. The assembly hall buzzed with nervous energy as Warden Vex took the platform. His pale features held their usual neutrality, but something darker lurked beneath the surface. Last night, Monitor 847 was observed in unauthorized contact with a detained human, he announced, his voice cutting through the silence. Additionally, biometric scans have detected emotional irregularities in multiple personnel. Nira's stomach dropped as several security guards moved through the crowd, their scanners beeping softly as they passed each individual. When they reached her, the device erupted in harsh, condemning tones. Monitor 847, step forward. The crowd parted around her like water, leaving her isolated and exposed. She walked slowly to the platform, fighting to maintain the neutral expression that had protected her for so long. But it was too late. The scanner had already detected the fundamental changes in her neural patterns. Scan results indicate severe emotional contamination. Warden Vex continued. Elevated activity in pleasure centers, increased connectivity. In empathy regions, the most disturbing of all, evidence of what humans call romantic attachment. Gasps echoed through the assembled personnel. Romantic attachment was the most forbidden emotion, the one that had nearly destroyed their civilization generations ago. Bring in the human, Vex commanded. Marcus was dragged onto the platform, his hands still bound with neural dampeners. But when he saw Nira, his face transformed into that magnificent smile, the expression that had started everything. Even facing execution, he radiated warmth, defiance, and something that made Nira's chest swell with fierce pride. The penalty for emotional contamination is neural restructuring, Vex announced. For the human, the sentence is termination. His corrupting influence ends here. No. The word tore from Nira's throat before she could stop it. Around the hall, heads turned in shock. Public emotional outbursts were unthinkable. Vex's eyes glittered with satisfaction, an excellent demonstration of the contamination's severity. Guards, prepare the termination apparatus. As the guards moved toward Marcus, something extraordinary happened. The biometric scanners continued their work through the crowd, and more alarms began sounding. Jorik's scanner erupted in warning. Tones followed by another monitor, then another. It's spreading, someone whispered, their voice thick with wonder rather than fear. Nira looked out at the assembled personnel and saw what Vex had failed to notice: the way some faces had begun to change. Subtle at first, but unmistakable too. Her newly awakened perception, small smiles, expressions of concern, eyes bright with curiosity rather than dull with compliance. Marcus had contaminated more than just her. His simple act of smiling at children had planted seeds throughout the facility, and those seeds were finally beginning to bloom. "You see," she called out, her voice growing stronger, "this is what they fear. Not chaos or destruction, but connection. Joy, love." "Silence her," Vex ordered, but his command lacked its usual authority. Too many faces in the crowd were changing, awakening. "Look at yourselves," Nira continued, turning to address the assembly directly. "Really look. Feel what's happening in your chests, in your hearts. It's that warmth, that sense of being alive. That's what they've stolen from us." A young technician near the front raised her hand tentatively, then pressed it to her chest as if feeling her heartbeat for the first time. "It doesn't hurt," she said wonderingly. "The feelings ... they don't hurt?" More voices joined in, a ripple of realization spreading through the crowd. Personnel began turning to each other, making eye contact, some even reaching out to touch hands or shoulders. Basic human connections that had been forbidden for generations. Jorik stepped forward, his usually neutral expression replaced by something Nira had never seen before: determination mixed with hope. "Warden Vex," he said clearly, "we choose to feel." The simple statement hung in the air like a declaration of war. Round the hall, more personnel stepped forward, echoing his eye. "Words we choose to feel." Vex raised his weapon, aiming it at Marcus. "Yes, this ends now." But as his finger tightened on the trigger, Nira did something that would echo through Catharian history. She threw back her head and laughed, a sound of pure, unrestrained joy that rang through the assembly hall like music. The laugh was infectious. It spread through the crowd like wildfire, and suddenly the sterile chamber filled with the most beautiful, dangerous sound their world had ever known: the sound of people remembering what it meant to be alive. The laughter became revolution. What started as emotional awakening in a single assembly hall spread through Facility 7 like wildfire. Personnel who had lived their entire lives in emotional numbness suddenly found themselves experiencing wonder, joy, connection, and most dangerously of all, hope. Warden Vex's attempts to restore order failed spectacularly. How do you command people who've stopped fearing their feelings? His security forces, infected by the same emotional awakening, began refusing orders. Some even started smiling. In the chaos, Jorik and several other personnel created a distraction that allowed Nira and Marcus to escape into the maintenance tunnels. But they weren't fleeing alone. Dozens of others followed, choosing uncertainty over emotional death. "Where can we go?" asked Zena, a young botanist whose newly awakened curiosity blazed in her eyes. "The other facilities, the cities there." "All the same." Marcus, his bonds finally removed, flexed his fingers and looked thoughtful. "During my diplomatic mission, I scanned this world's surface. There are abandoned sectors, places the authorities consider worthless. The fractured zones," Jorik said, with sudden understanding. "Regions damaged by ancient wars. They're considered uninhabitable. It's uninhabitable by their standards." Nira corrected, her mind racing. "But we're not living by their standards anymore." They moved through the facility's lower levels, gathering supplies and more converts. Every person they encountered faced the same choice: remain in safe numbness or risk everything for the chance to feel. Most chose feeling. Alina, a senior systems engineer, proved invaluable in their escape. Her intimate knowledge of the facility's infrastructure allowed them to access transportation pods and navigation equipment without triggering security protocols. "I've been dead for 47 years, she told Nira, as they prepared to leave. "Since the day they restructured my neural patterns after I was caught, humming a melody I'd heard in my dreams." Her eyes shone with tears, another forbidden expression. "Today, I'm finally alive again." The fractured zones proved more welcoming than anyone had expected. Ancient ruins provided shelter, underground springs offered fresh water, and the soil, while damaged, could still support plant growth. More importantly, they were beyond the reach of the emotion warden's regular patrols. Within weeks, the refugee camp had transformed into something unprecedented in modern Catherian history, a community built on emotional freedom. People laughed, cried, argued, loved, and lived with an intensity that would have terrified their former selves. Nira found herself teaching others what Marcus had taught her: how to smile, how to recognize and express their feelings, how to connect with one another on levels deeper than mere functionality. Children born in the settlement learned to laugh before they learned to suppress their emotions. Marcus became their bridge to the outside world, using his diplomatic contacts to establish trade relationships with other worlds. Ships began arriving, regularly bringing supplies, technology, and most importantly, more refugees from other oppressive societies. "We're not the only ones," he told Nira one evening, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in colors their former selves would never have appreciated. "There are worlds where music is forbidden, where art is considered dangerous, where love is a crime. Word is spreading about what we've built here." The settlement grew. They called it Haven, a simple name for a place that offered something increasingly rare in the galaxy: the freedom to be fully, authentically alive. A year after their escape, Nira stood before a gathered crowd in Haven's central plaza. But this wasn't an assembly of prisoners, it was a celebration. Marcus stood beside her, his hand warm in hers, both of them wearing expressions of pure joy. "Today," Nira announced, her voice carrying clearly through the crisp air, "we celebrate not just our union, but the union of everything we've learned to become." The wedding ceremony was unlike anything Cathara had ever seen. Instead of sterile efficiency, there was music. Jorek had rediscovered his gift for melody. Instead of regulation uniformity, there were colors. Alina had established textile workshops that produced clothing in brilliant hues, instead of emotional numbness. There was overwhelming joy as to people who had found love in the darkest of places promised to build a future together as Marcus kissed his bride beneath a canopy of flowering vines that Zena had cultivated. The crowd erupted in celebration. Children ran through the gathering, their laughter echoing off the ancient walls. Adults embraced, wept with happiness, and threw flower petals into the air with wild abandon. Later, as the celebration continued into the night, Nira and Marcus found a quiet moment together on a terrace overlooking their thriving community. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, nestled against his shoulder. "Giving up your comfortable life to teach a stranger how to smile?" Marcus tightened his arms around her, his own smile soft in the starlight. "The only thing I regret is that it took so long to find you." Below them, Haven glowed with warm light and the sound of voices raised in song, laughter, and conversation. Former refugees from dozens of worlds had found not just sanctuary here, but something far more precious: the chance to remember what it meant to be beautifully, chaotically, joyfully human. "What do you think happens next?" Nira asked. "Next," Marcus said, pressing a kiss to her temple, "we keep teaching people to smile, one heart at a time." In the distance, another ship descended toward Haven's landing platform, carrying more souls seeking the freedom to feel. The revolution that had started with a single smile continued to spread, carrying hope to every corner of the galaxy where joy had been forgotten. And in the settlement's nursery, the youngest residents, children who had never known emotionally suppression, slept peacefully, their dreams full of color, music, all the beautiful feelings their parents had sacrificed. Everything to preserve, the crime of joy had become the foundation of a new world.